Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Andy Roark, and this is the Uncharted podcast. Guys, I'm here hanging out today with my friend Maria Pirita, and we got a question from the mailbag, which was simply, is it worth it to become a certified veterinary assistant? And Maria and I started talking we talk about education and credentialing in general, and we get all up in that. And I have some thoughts about return on investment when it comes to credentialing. And spoiler alert, I am not going to stand here and be like, you should do it, always do it. I'm going, it very, very much depends, I think. And we get very much into that. And so if you're thinking about credentialing, whether that's becoming a certified veterinary assistant, whether that's going and becoming a licensed veterinary technician, whether it's getting your CVPM, whether it's even becoming a veterinarian, getting your DVM, going to vet school, I have some questions for you before we decide if this is a good idea or not. So anyway, if you're weighing those things and think, but Andy, I want to grow my career, I want to grow and develop, I want to make more money, let's talk about this before we sign up for any programs, shall we? That's what this episode is all about. Let's get into it.
And now, the Uncharted podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and my dear friend, the one and only Maria Pirita. How are you?
I'm doing great, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. My senses are heightened right now. I am on high alert. I have picked up a new hobby that I'm not exactly sure is legal. And so it's fall and the weather is cooling. And if you want to transplant plants, now is the time of year to do it, right? You don't want to do it after the ground is frozen. And here in South Carolina, during the summer, it's just too hot. Like if you transplant something, it gets stressed from being transplanted, and then it's just hot and it bakes. And so if you want to transplant things, especially trees, you want to do it now. And there are some really beautiful trees that have sprouted up beside the road. And they're like underneath the power line. So they're gonna be too big. They're too close to the road. They're going to get cut down. And I have been driving around and digging them up and putting them in my car and bringing them home and giving them a new life. I call it natural resource reallocation program.
First of all, genius. And also, I don't know if we can air this episode now because you might have just confessed to crime. I have no idea.
I have not taken anything from in front of anyone's house.
Okay.
But if they have like a fenced yard and it's like next to the road in their fenced yard, I mean, clearly, don't get me wrong. It's not if they put it in a bed or something, I'm not doing that. But if it's, it's just a baby little random volunteer plant, and I'm like, well, look, I'm gonna love this plant and give it a good home.
And give it a better home now.
Yeah, and then the city's gonna just cut it. It's too close to the sidewalk or whatever. Like, don't get me wrong. This is not a common thing, but I did dig up a juniper today. That's going to be a big, beautiful tree, and it was smack dab underneath a power line, beside the road in the woods. And I'm like, there's nothing. But again, I've still wrestled with it. That's why, basically, when you're wrestling with something and you're like, I'm just going to say it out loud, and then I'm going to feel like I'm not hiding anything, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's what you just did. That's great. When I worked at Home Depot, similar situation.
Yeah.
When I worked at Home Depot, there was a garden associate that was just like, hey, would you like some succulents? And I was like, yeah, I love plants.
The answer is always yes. Yeah.
And into his apron, he went in, he pulled out a bunch of tiny little succulent clippings. Yeah. And he's like, you can turn these into more succulents.
He just reached in his pocket and he had those?
In his pocket. And he reached in it. I was like, no way, I'll totally take some. That sounds awesome. Where did you get these? And he's like, oh, I work in the garden department. I was like, did you just pluck these off?
Pluck them off?
And put them in your apron? Because I'm pretty sure that's stealing, sir. And I will not be an accomplice. Thank you very much. And he was like, no. He was like, no. They fall off the succulents all the time because people bump into them. And then, if you pick them up, you can just replant them. And I'm like, but you're still taking them. Isn't that still technically stealing? And he's like, no, because they would have just gone in the trash. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because I think you're right.
Yeah, he is right. I feel like this is a very roundabout way of you attacking what I'm doing. You're like, I think it's totally cool, Andy. But let me tell you about a guy with succulents, and the moral of the story was he's a thief.
I mean, if the shoe fits.
Oh, my God.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No. I thought it would make you feel better, actually.
I think it made me feel worse.
But I think it was the opposite.
It definitely made me feel worse. Yeah, it definitely made me feel like if I'd asked you to come up, do you want a juniper, you would have been like, this feels like stealing.
If you give me a juniper for Christmas, I will decline the present.
I will wrap it in one string of Christmas lights, and you will happily take it because I know you.
That's
you'll
also
be like,
true.
I'm taking this. Okay,
Let's
do this mailbag. Let's do this mailbag.
And speaking about things that are useful,
Okay.
do you think becoming a certified veterinary assistant is one of those useful things?
That
was my attempt at a transition.
No, I love it. That was a
okay.
smooth transition.
It was
to
all
the
right.
mailbag question, which
I
is
have a
very
lot
simply,
to learn from Goss still.
Is
It's
this,
okay.
I'm a little bit nervous about this, but I'm happy to answer the question. My answer is a very strong. It depends. It is a very strong. It depends. There's a lot of people, especially in vet medicine, I think, who, like me, were raised with the idea that more education is better. Credentials are better, getting degrees are better. And I just don't know that the world works that way anymore. And my real take on this, whether it's being a certified vet assistant, which I think is a particular niche thing, or whether it's getting your CVPM, or whether it's going to tech school or whatever, I think it's time to really look at these things holistically and say, I will tell you, when people look at me and they'll say, should my kid go to vet school? I love vet medicine, but I do not say yes. And I think that might shock people because I really do love this profession and I talk a lot about it, but I don't say yes. I very much every time say, well, it depends. Yeah. And then I start to break it down. What is your reaction to that? Are you on team always get certification, or like you've got a CVPM? Like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that they are different, becoming certified veterinary technician, certified veterinary assistant, and a certified veterinary practice manager. So I'm not a fan of grouping them all together. And so I think
Why do you think they're different? What do you see as different? Other than like what they allow you to do, how are they different?
Well, that is exactly it. So a certified veterinary technician does allow you to do more than a veterinary assistant that's not certified veterinary technician. And so the difference in, like, for example, a certified veterinary technician can technically in some states perform even euthanasia.
Yes.
And so like that's a huge deal. That's a big difference in a veterinary assistant and a certified veterinary technician. And so, but when we are comparing veterinary assistant to certified veterinary assistant, there's actually not that much of a difference in what you can legally do. The difference becomes in the knowledge where you're at. And so I am very much with you on, it depends on what your goals are. And so, and I do want to read this mailbag too, because it was very specific. It said, what are your thoughts on going to school for veterinary assistant or just working in the field without a degree? And so those are the two things that we're comparing when it comes to this mailbag. And so I think that that's a very different question from, do you think becoming a certified veterinary technician is worth it? And that's why I think they're different. Same with CVPM, with certified veterinary practice manager versus a veterinary practice manager. Now we're talking about other things within career. The CVPM does open you up for that. Being a veterinary practice manager is not. And so the overall question about credentialing is really important. And I think you're right for a lot of different reasons. In this particular mailbag, I think it depends on multiple factors. And I really want to dive into those. Why do you say that it depends? Like, which factors are you looking at when you're asking this question of, should we be going to become certified veterinary assistant?
Okay. So there's a number of different things when we look at like credentialing that I think people should step back and look at, right? And so the first thing is financially, what is this going to do for you? And again, there's more, but I think that's the first thing. Look at the cost of becoming a certified veterinary assistant. And then look at what you're going to earn on the other side. And some people really don't like that. They don't like that I would say that. Same thing with the certified vet techs is, again, I am pro vet tech. I love my vet techs. And as part of looking out for my vet techs, if someone says to me, I'm thinking about going to tech school, my advice is, given where you're working, what is going to be different for you when you come back? You know, like, and what is your investment to make this happen? And then what's going to happen? And I'd say this because I have seen a lot of people, and I think this is true for veterinarians too. I've seen a lot of people who are like, they just kind of take it on faith. I'm going to go and get this certification, and the numbers will make sense on the other side. But especially for your certified veterinary assistants, I don't know that there's any standardization that you can rely on that says, yes, this is going to make financial sense. You're going to see a significant difference when you come back. I don't know if that's true. That's very much a practice by practice basis. And so there are some wonderful practices out there that incentivize going and getting your certification as a vet assistant. And the practice where I work is just phenomenal in a lot of ways. And that's one of them is I think that they do a good job of compensating people based on their certification and their knowledge. And then also, tiering the skills and what you get to do so that it makes some sense. The first thing is, does this make financial sense with where you are or where you're going to be working? And again, it doesn't matter if it makes sense in New York City. It doesn't matter if it makes sense, in Pittsburgh. If you work in rural Pennsylvania and it's not going to translate, you're taking on this expense and financially that might not work out. The other thing is, what are you going to be able to do? Like, what is this certificate going to actually do for you? What doors does it open? How does it let you use your skills? And the last question is, how do you feel about that? And so there is a scenario. And I say this to veterinarians. You look at the student debt of some vets coming out and what vets earn, and I go, financially, I don't know that this made sense. And they look at me and they say, I love this job. This is all I've ever wanted to do, and now I'm doing it, and I love it. And I'm like, good on you then. Like, that's the right answer, because it's not all about what is my path to more dollars. Like, I promise you, that's not the meaning of life. But there's got to be some balance of what you get. Like, what is your return on your investment? And the investment is not just the cost of a certification. It's time, it's energy, it's effort, it's juggling another thing. It's still, most people are still working while they're going through and they're getting their certification. And so you're carrying this sort of burden. And I got to ask you, like, what do you see on the other side that gives you a return on this investment? And if you see that return, I'm not going to beat you up about it. And how you weigh the return, it doesn't have to be how I weigh the return. I might look at it and say hypothetically, I'm looking at a veterinarian and I go, if you're going to have more than 2.5 times student debt to what you're going to earn coming out, this doesn't make a lot of financial sense. And they say, this is the most meaningful thing in my life. This is what I've always wanted. I believe that doing this work is my purpose. I can't really argue with that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter that I would look at the numbers. Anyway, so that's why I say, does it matter? But I think that question about return on investment, what is the investment and what do you get when you're on the other side? I have to apply that to every certification, all the way up to being a DVM. I have people all the time, Maria, that ask me, should I go get an MBA? And these will be doctors, and they'll be looking at a career in industry, or they will be a practice owner, and they're thinking about owning multiple practices, and they'll ask me about my advice on an MBA, and it's exactly the same as it is for this veterinary assistant of like, what is your return on investment? And let's get serious about it, not just the feels. I think there's a wrong reason to do this, and it's ego. I think it's a wrong reason to do this, and ego. I think that there is an imposter syndrome aspect of a lot of certification and a lot of education, where people think, if I was a certified veterinary assistant, then I would be more confident and the other assistants would listen to me. And like, I don't know that that's true. If I had an MBA, then I would be comfortable in my business and I would know what I was doing and I would sleep soundly as a business owner. I was like, I'm here to tell you that's not true. There's no degree that's going to make you feel that way. But again, I think some people imagine how they're going to feel or the pride they're going to have, or they just want it for their ego. They're like, I want this so that people know what I know. And I'm kind of like, what work are you going to actually be able to do? Like, what is your day going to be like when you have this? And then let's talk about if this is a good expense and if this could be justified.
Well, I think that's super fair. And I think that was where I wanted to go with the worth it piece too, from a headspace perspective is, something that's really valuable to me might not be super valuable to someone else. And so I don't think that any one of us can really answer that question for our specific mailbag submitter here, right? Our listener that's wondering if this is worth it, because to you, it may be worth it for other reasons. Mm-hmm. And so it's very simple, like something that I find valuable is just not going to be the same for somebody else. And so there's that aspect. I think that this really depends on, again, like what you talked about, what your goals are, because for certification, I do think that some people can do these things for the wrong reasons. And if you think that because you're certified that other people are going to listen to you, boy, I'm going to tell you right now, that is absolutely wrong. Because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Like,
and it happens less and less now. It
does.
I think a lot of veterinarians are like, I'm going to go to vet school and then people will listen to me. And now you're standing in the exam room and people are like, I read this on truthaboutdirtyvets.com, and that's what it said. And you're like,
but my breeder told me, my groomer said, but
I don't mean to dunk on those people.
No, absolutely not.
You know, and you're the same way. It's like, I always love it when people say, my breeder said this. And I said, great, let's talk about it. But it's because I didn't go get a DVM to be right. You know, I'm like, I'm fine in that way. But I think some people do feel like people will recognize my expertise if I have this. And I really think it has to be about you and not about how you think other people are going to behave when you show up with your extra letters.
With your extra letters. And I do think, too, it depends on what your goals are, like you mentioned. So a lot of times what I will tell people is, if you are having a hard time getting a job as a veterinary assistant and you can't get your foot in the door to a clinic, then certified veterinary assistant is a goal that you can kind of put on your resume. It will make you stand out. Like, as a practice manager, I will tell you right now, the person that had to do the hiring, if I am looking at 1,000 resumes and I narrow it down to 5, and they all have pretty much the same thing on their resumes, but one of them has a certified veterinary assistant degree and the other one does not, that person is going to stand out to me. And so I think in that aspect, it may be worth it to somebody who perhaps wants to get into vet med field and they are, they can't seem to find a clinic that will hire them because there's always other people who, have more experience or what have you. It might help you in that aspect. I have certainly seen.
It's still a gamble though, right? Like there's a chance that you're now going to be a guy, not just a guy who can't get a job in a vet clinic, but you're a guy who can't get a job in a vet clinic and you went to the cost and effort of getting a certified veterinary assistant,
in most of
license.
those programs, you have to do some sort of clinical hours at a veterinary clinic. So it doesn't, it's not 1,000, it's not just like a 50-50 gamble. It's a pretty good gamble because you're also getting connected with a veterinary clinic where you can't, like I did as a practice manager, we had the people come in from those programs and I did hire 2 or 3 of them from those programs for my clinic because I met them through there. They worked at my clinic, while they were doing their clinicals, and then they showed great, communication, what have you, whatever reason I decided to hire them, I did. So it's not like it is still a gamble, but it's not a 50-50 gamble. Like it is potentially going to help you get your foot in the door because you're going to get lined up with a clinic. Even if it is through an externship program, they may not hire you. And there has certainly been plenty of those students that came through that I was like, no, this person is not going to be a fit for a clinic and I'm not going to pursue hiring them after this program. It's not the only skill that you need to have. But that's where I think it does matter too, is just like if the conversation changes, if you don't work at a clinic currently and your dream is to work at a clinic and you don't want to start as a receptionist, you want to start as a veterinary assistant and you can go through this route. I also think that it's important to consider if you plan on going further with your career. So if you want to become a certified veterinary technician, and as of right now, you are not working in a clinic and you want to get your foot in the door in a clinic and then that could be a stepping stone. Like you could absolutely use it as a stepping stone to become a certified veterinary technician at some point in the future. Most of those courses you can kind of use for that degree. And so I think in those aspects, it's important to recognize that it could be, depending on what situation you're in. Now, the story changes a little bit if you are already a veterinary assistant and now you're pursuing certified veterinary assistant credentialing. And I think now it comes into the story that you're talking about, whether is this going to be worth it? Because I will tell you right now, a mistake that a lot of people make is they will get this credentialing, they'll go to school for it, and then expect a raise right after they graduate. Yeah. And that's not how the world works. A lot of times you don't get that raise until you can prove that you can bring in the skills that then obviously mean that the clinic is bringing in more money and therefore you are worth more. And then you will be given that raise. Yeah. And so I think that's also something important to consider.
Well, I think you're right. I want to sort of jump on that. So I had things from my list is like, whenever anyone comes to me and they said, I want to get a degree, I want to get a certificate, there's always like a little bit of there's a check that I think you need to do. And it's the wishful thinking check. Like, is this wishful thinking? And like, do you think if I had this, then I would be appreciated? If I had this, then I would get opportunities I'm not getting. If I had this, then I would get paid a salary that'd be more attractive or more beneficial, or a salary that I need and I'm not currently getting in this industry, which I see that, and it's really sad. One of the pieces of life advice that I picked up early on, and I try to tell to other people is my belief that you should not do anything in this world based on what you think others are going to do in return in the future.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's if you want to help somebody, then you should help them. But you should not help someone based on an unspoken assumption that they are going to behave for you in a certain way later on. And I see this. I see it a lot. You see it a lot in people who are like, I came in and I worked, did all this extra work and I did all of these things. And I always thought that I was going to get a raise later on. And I would say, that's always dangerous thinking. And I've just seen a lot of people who are upset by that. Now, if you're told, hey, this is where this is going, this is what's going to happen, and this is sort of what our agreement is, then you should do that thing if that's what you want. But you just I see a lot of people making assumptions about what other people are going to do or how other people are going to behave if blank happens. And that's just a dangerous thing. As a business owner, you should not manage your people with the idea that if I do this for them, then they'll be grateful and later on they'll perform in this other way, or they'll step up or do whatever it is. You should manage people in the way that you're proud of and that makes you feel good, and that you want to take care of people. But it shouldn't be about guessing what they're going to do for you. And so anyway, that's just sort of life advice. I see that a lot with people who are working as, say, vet assistants, and they decide, if I go and get this, then I'm going to get this raise, or I'm going to, do X, Y, and Z. And maybe you will. But before I signed on the dotted line and I did the work and I put in the time, I would simply ask the question to my employer and say, I'm strongly considering doing this program. And there's a time and energy and cost investment for me. If I went through this program and I completed it, would my position here change? Would I be allowed to do other things? Would my compensation be affected? And just stop talking and see what they say. And they might say, yeah, I don't know. Ask the questions that you need to get clarity about what would happen. Now, they might not be able to say, especially if they're a small practice, they might not have this in the handbook of, oh, you're going to get this amount of raise. They would probably say something hand-wavy like, if you come back and you're able to do more things, then this might be a possibility. And I would sort of try to politely ask for more clarity and say, well, as I said, I'm really trying to make this choice and I want to make a good choice. Do you, what would be a timeline after me coming back? Or do you have what are your thoughts around this as far as what a raise would entail? And when would that happen? Would that happen when I got a certificate? Would that be something that we would assess later on? And again, I would try to get as much clarity as I could. You have to empathize with the practice. If Maria says, I'm the practice manager and I'm going to go get my CVPM and I'm going to come back, and the practice says, well, is this going to improve your efficiency? Are you going to, to have more skill and grace in managing the staff? Are you going to be able to perform more highly? Nobody really knows that, but I think it's good to have the conversation at least before people make that investment. And I'll just say to practices who are hearing this, I think you should be honest with people. And if people say, I want to go and become a certified vet tech, and I've seen this, and the vet techs don't like it, but I've seen practices say, we don't need another certified vet tech. We need assistance. And so if you go and become a certified vet tech, we're going to tell you not to do it, but it's not in line with what we need. And so, I think that's a really important point. Part of the thing when I do what is the return on investment is, what is your employer's support of this? And again, all of this, I hope I'm coming off not as anti-vet medicine, but just being as big pro-pragmatism. Let's be honest about what education looks like when you're a working professional. If your employer is going to pick up the tab or part of the tab, it's because they believe that your training is going to advance their needs as a business. You're not going to find an employer who's going to say, sure, I'll pay for underwater basket weaving courses for you. It doesn't help them. And so the same thing is kind of here. It doesn't make them bad. And I think some people are like, how dare my employer not pay for me to go get my CVT? How dare they not pay for me to get my CVPM? And I say, well, what is the business case for them? How do their goals align with this? And you probably didn't do anything wrong. It just may not be that that's where they are, what they're trying to do. So anyway, all of that to say, this is part of the conversation about what does this really look like? I'm thinking about making this choice. would you be up for supporting me in making this? What could that look like? And what would your expectations be? And so anyway, there's a lot of those conversations about what are expectations in the future? What does this look like? But again, I really drill into the idea of I want to get as much clarity around my specific circumstances as I possibly can. And that's really going to be what decides this for me.
I think that conversation is not only important, I think it's crucial. And you're setting those expectations with your employer, but at the same time, being able to ask for those resources. So in the conversation that you talked about, and say the employer says, it will change the fact that you can do other things for the practice. I would dig in and say, what are those things? And can I learn them without this certification, right? Because if it turns out that your practice is more than happy to teach you how to do blood draws and more than happy to teach you how to, help with whatever thing that you want to help with, they just don't have the time. Well, now you're setting that expectation with your employer and you're being able to talk to them about where you would like to grow. And so if your desire is truly just to learn more medical knowledge around veterinary medicine, there are other resources available to you that might even be free, depending on where you go, that can help you learn what you want to learn. So like the learning to us, we are very fortunate to live in an era where we can learn now. And there are so many resources available to us at not so much the cost of an actual degree. It's the reason why I think certifications have risen in just attraction, right? Like people have liked them so much. But in general, really try to, goes back to the same point of really, why are you doing this? And if the why is, I want to get better at, X, Y, Z, is there a different way to get better at those things that's not going to cost you the thousands of dollars to go to school? And so I think that opens up that conversation.
I really love that. So I love where your head's at. I think that's 100% the way that I would go about approaching this. I would try to flip the whole thing on its head. I think a lot of times people jump all the way down the road to, do I want to go to get this certification? I think the best thing to do is to sit back by yourself and say, what do you want? What would make you feel? Are you thinking about the certificate because there are things that you want to do or you want to be more involved in the medicine and you're not able to do those things? What exactly is it? I think a lot of times people are like, I just want to advance. And I would say, what does that really mean to you? And they're like, I don't know. And it's scary. That's a soul searching exercise. The way that I would like to approach this is go to the boss, go to the manager and say, hey, I'm having lots of thoughts about my own professional development. I was wondering if we could sort of talk about what my development might look like in the future. And I would ask for the meeting like that and say, is there a time that we can do this? And I like to tell them that that's what I'm thinking so that they can put some thought into it because they probably haven't really thought about my development that much. But tip them off and just say, I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm trying to surprise them. I've been thinking about my professional development, kind of where I'm going and how I'm going to grow in the coming years. And I want to kind of talk to you guys about that and see what ideas you had about that. And then also sort of maybe share some of my own ideas and see what might be possible going forward. And it's great to go in and say to them, do you have ideas about how you would like to see me develop here in the coming years? Like the next, say, 3 to 5 years. And they might say, we just want to support you. What thoughts do you have? And I would like to say, well, these are the things I'm really interested in doing. And this is what I'd like to be able to do. And this is, what I'd like my compensation to kind of look like. And obviously, I want to grow my skills to support that compensation. And so I've got these ideas, and these are things that I would like to learn and grow in. And I wanted to see if that seemed possible to you. And then we might be able to decide how to get there. And let them say, honestly, Andy, if you want to earn that salary, these are the types of things that I would like to see you do or I would need to see you doing. And then we can decide a certificate is what's going to get me there or not. And maybe it is, and maybe it's not. But it's sad how often I see people that will go and they will embark on a learning or development path for themselves. And it's not the one that their employer is excited about or feels like they need. And then the person says, I've done all this work. I've grown all this way. I've learned all these skills. And the employer's like, yes, you have. And that's great. And also, it's not what we need right now, and we need to use the resources we have to get the things that we need. And so anyway, that's just a sad situation when I see it, but you can get away from a lot of that stuff just by having a good conversation about what does development for me look like and what resources are there to support that, and can we agree on where we would both like for me to be in 3 years, and then can we let's make some checkpoints, let's make some steps along the way, and let's make this happen. And I just think that is a much more effective way to get where you want to be and to do the things that you want to do, as opposed to just saying, certify me, baby. Just let's pick up, let's hit the books.
All right. Well, now you're going into action steps, I think, with this meeting. So let's take a break right here, maybe, and then we'll go into those action steps.
All right. So yeah, action steps. Action step from me is a soul searching exercise where the question is, what do you want? Where do you want to go? Like, why do you want to grow and develop? What do you want to be able to do? And so I would start with that. And then part two is part of the soul searching exercise. If you're looking at education, is this going to get me where I want to go? And then what is the risk and reward that is offered by this path?
Yeah. I had very similar to you. In the fivefold why is an excellent exercise to do in this kind of case too, is really dig down to why do you want to become a certified veterinary assistant in the first place? Mm-hmm. It may be worth it to you. Like, none of us can answer that question if it's going to be worth it to you or not, because every situation is going to be a little bit different. But being able to do that soul searching exercise is going to be number one, to really figure out, is this something that you specifically want? Is this something that somebody kind of brought up to you and you're now considering it? Is it for any of the reasons that we talked about in the headspace piece or anything like that? But that is going to be step number one. And I think step number two, before you get to that meeting that we were just talking about, having that with management, is really to make sure you have, if you decide this is definitely what I want to become a certified veterinary assistant or a certified veterinary technician, and one day, and this is my role, one of the ways I'm going to get there, now you're going to have all of the information that you need before you have this meeting with your leadership team, right? Especially if you're trying to have them support you with any kind of financial help. And I do want to say this, and so a credentialing can help. It's not essential. We talked about this. If you're going to be looking and you still want to become a certified veterinary assistant and you're like, this is part of my heart, I want to do it, this is something that I want to do, try and pick a program that is reputable, perhaps even a NAVTA approved program. A lot of times I see this as a mistake. The veterinary assistants will go with a program by their local college and think that that's, well enough to get them their certification. But sometimes those credits don't transfer over for your certified veterinary technician degree, which is going to be a little bit bigger. And so you want to make sure that you talk about all of these things and get all of this information. How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? Because if you're going to be taking time off from the clinic to do this, your clinic is going to need to know. And so you need to be able to answer all of those questions before you have the conversation, because those questions may come up during that conversation with your leadership team. And I think then that next step is that one about talking to your leadership about, hey, if I were to do this, what would that look like? And I think, Andy, you laid out some beautiful questions to ask somebody. So let me ask you real quick, what kind of information, if somebody was coming to you and they were like, Andy, I'm thinking about getting more certification. I'm thinking about growing my skills. And this is what I've been thinking about. What kind of information would you say is crucial to have before you have this conversation with your leadership team?
Are you asking me?
As a leader, what kind of information would you want to have?
Oh, great. So
Sam's coming to you. I'm like, hey, Andy.
Yeah.
Boss of mine, my lovely, lovely leader. I would like to become a certified veterinary technician to help the practice. So
what's important to you about becoming a certified veterinary assistant?
I think that it will open up my skill set. It's going to help me have just some of the knowledge that sometimes I feel like I get really confused, especially when you start talking about blood works and things like that, or radiographs. So I think it's just going to overall help me to be able to communicate with clients more, which I think could help the practice a lot more, especially if I can get better compliance, if I can get the estimates approved, things like that.
I like this. I like how you're sort of thinking about it. So if you had this certification, what exactly do you anticipate that you would be able to do? You had some ideas about understanding blood work and things like that. Could you make me a list of sort of the things that you feel like you would be able to do or you'd be excited to do if you had this certificate?
Yeah, I think I could do that.
Okay. If you will put that together for me, and then if you don't mind, just email it. Just email it to me and let me look at it a little bit. And then let's get back together and we can sort of talk about it. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
Great.
This is great.
So that's honestly, I think that those are the questions that I would ask probably up front. But you see, like, I very much want to get down to the, what do you want to be able to do? And it's possible I'll get your list and say, Maria, I'm not convinced that you need a certificate to do these things. I think you and I could develop a training program for this. And I think that would increase your value to the practice. And that's possible. Or I might say, you know what, this is really nice. And I like where your thoughts are. And I do think that getting education for you in this, for these areas I think that would be ideal. And then what I would do is I would turn it back around to you yet again and say, let's say we want to move forward and I thought this is a great idea. I would say, can you pull together some course programs, some certification programs that would address these things? And let's kind of look at them and make sure that the programs would fit well with where you're trying to go and things like that. And I would ideally, I would like for you to bring me the one based on your needs that you really like. And then let's look at it together. And that stops me from sort of guessing as to what's in there, and also sort of doesn't send me down a research pathway that I may not have a lot of time or interest in doing.
I think that's super smart, especially looking at this like listed skills. It's super important, especially when we're talking about these certified veterinary assistants and technicians too, because a lot of times we think that because we're going to get a certified veterinary assistant that those tech skills are going to come immediately. It's like, man, so many of those still require practice. So I think that's super smart. I think considering how much it costs, obviously your leadership is going to want to know about that, and also being realistic about the role. And so like, obviously being an assistant, it's going to be physically and emotionally draining if you don't have any experience and you're like trying to get your foot in the door. And so like, if you're looking at advancement opportunities and things like that, and you're like, I definitely want to become a certified veterinary assistant, lean on that and know that you're going to get that, but know that you're going to go in there with the cost benefit, knowing that you may not make as much money as you need to pay off that degree right off the bat, right? So like, if this listener is still listening right now and they're like, okay, it's not the fact that I'm not in a clinic right now, it's that I want to get in a clinic and I can't, just do it knowing that what the salary is before you do it, and that it's not always going to guarantee you a job in veterinary medicine, but it may help you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I think that if you're thinking about sort of certification in general, regardless of the position, I think that these are all probably the steps that I would take. And so I think including your employer a bit in the decision-making process, if you want them to try to help support you go through it, I think it's a good idea. The other thing I want to point out as an opportunity, I think you called this out really well. If you are an employer and your people are coming to you and they're saying, I want to go and invest, I want to get my credentials for being a vet assistant or a veterinary technician, if you really want to get return on your investment, you should look at that curriculum and you should talk to that person and you should lean into training and hands-on implementation while they're getting their education. And again, classroom learning and practical clinical ability are different things. And you can really help to supercharge someone's clinical education that they're getting by facilitating skill building. You know, if you know that they're working on these things or that these are their goals or this is an area that they're learning, let them practice, encourage them to practice. You know, if you're learning basic cytology, let's know that that's what they're kind of working on, and let's call out the things that we're looking at and get them some reps on the microscope and just really pile extra stuff on. And you know, I think if you don't have the right mindset, you go, well, Andy's trying to put extra work on me while I'm getting my degree. But I think if you're serious about what this is going to do for you and you really want to grow and develop, I think taking what you're doing in your job and matching up with what you're doing in your education, I think that's really how you get the most out of the platform.
I think that's genius. And honestly, in a lot of states, so long as, and this is about certified veterinary technicians, so we talked about certified veterinary technicians being able to do, for example, cystocentesis. In a lot of states, they can actually perform those cystocentesis while they're still in school. So I think it's just utilizing your technicians in a way that's really efficient, but also in a way that allows them to be able to practice. Because the truth is, for a lot of these programs, you just have to take a video of you doing it once. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to duplicate that same skill over and over again. So I think that's actually just really smart from a practice leadership perspective in general. So yeah. I love that.
Good.
Anything else for our listener?
I feel pretty good about where we are with this. Hopefully we've talked through some good headspace on kind of what to think about in credentialing and in education in general. I like the conversations that we had about sort of how much to include employers. Guys, I think the most important thing for me is really you need to think about what you want. And I would caution people, don't buy into the idea that credentialing equals good equals growth. I really want to push people to think about what fills your cup. You know, what is the thing that makes you excited to head into the practice? And what's the best way to kind of get there? And if it's about I need to increase my income, there's nothing wrong with that. I really understand that, and I hear that a lot from our paraprofessionals and our support staff. I would start with the questions around, hey boss, what do you see for me is in terms of development, and I would like to increase my income over the next 16 months, 18 months, something like that. What would that look like, do you think, in terms of, how I might increase my value to the practice and what sort of compensation packages might be possible? And I think it's having that conversation outside the confines of, this is a program I want to sign up for and I want you to pay for.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's perfect.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for being here, Maria. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, everybody. And that's what we got. Guys, thanks for being here. Thanks to Maria for her help. Guys, as always, if you have a question for us, send in the mailbag. The email address is podcast@unchartedvet.com. That's podcast@unchartedvet.com. Guys, I hope to see you again next week on the podcast. I'd love to see you in person on January 16th in Orlando at our Uncharted Vet Conference. If you're still listening right now, you're into Uncharted. I got to tell you, you are. You should come and work with us in person. We have got a great day. We are doing a leadership audit at the beginning of the day. Who are you? Where are you going? If you thought today was interesting to think about, where am I trying to go in my career? That is what we're going to be doing. We're going to have a workshop on that. I am doing a workshop all about building a culture of accountability. It is about building your bench, getting people to do what they're supposed to do, coaching them to be able to make decisions on their own, and also to follow through with what they're setting out to do. And so we're going to talk about that. And then the last thing is going to be, on team communications. And Maria Pirita is running a workshop on team communications and effective team communication. Guys, it is going to be great for getting your people to talk to each other. And so anyway, if you're like, boy, that sounds like an incredible transformative day that would give me a ton of tools and unlock a lot for me. Yeah, it totally would. You should come. It's on January 16th in Orlando. Come down, hang out with us, and then go to the VMX conference. Get your CE at the biggest vet conference in the world, and you'll have a bunch of friends because the Uncharted event is hugely interactive. We focus heavily on networking and making connections and finding other people who are going places and doing cool things. And so you'll get to have a great time at a great conference with great new friends. How awesome is that? I want to make that happen for you. Head over to unchartedvet.com and check out our registration links there. All right, guys, take it easy. I'll talk to you soon.